well, most of you, if not all of you, would have been tuned in last night to hear what the Prime Minister had to say. There was a lot to talk about as relates to the pension. It was the only subject matter at hand. I know a lot of you probably anticipated some sort of election announcement, but no, that was not the case. I'm your host, Kishan Thomas. This morning we have a panel of, esteemed individuals who are going to dissect the whole address last night, so we could get a clearer picture as to moving forward what can be expected, to get the insight as to what they thought last night. We have William Joseph with us. We have Ray Roberts. We also have Rhonda Jones of the DPA. And of course, going to tell us about their involvement. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Okay. It's all right. It's nice to have you all up with us this morning, very early. So we're going to go straight into it. I'm going to start with Mr. Roberts and Mr. Joseph first, and then we're going to trickle down. Last night, the Prime Minister's address, the expectation coming from Sunday, a lot of people probably thought, well, probably we're going to hear something about dissolving the Parliament, etc., indicating elections in the near future. That was not the case, but we saw a lot of information, and Prime Minister delved into the pension issue. Give us your thoughts as it relates to the address last night. Mr. Williams, you want to go first?
Yeah, well, if you're hearing me, I could go first.
Yeah, okay.
You hearing me?
Yes, excellent. I'm hearing you.
All right, thank you. And good morning, everyone, your fellow panelists, of course, and your viewers and listeners. Yes, I think we are about to engage in a very important national debate because of the sheer significance of the issue we are treating with. I should like to set the table in this way before we delve into the speech. The speech centered on pension for public officers, and therefore the context of public service pension, I think, needs to be understood as a matter of education by all concerned and interested Grenadians. Very simply, Grenada was a colony for several years of Britain. The colonial model says that the colony must resemble the kingdom, and therefore the British administrative system was transplanted to Grenada. So you had a governor, and you had a financial secretary, and you had public officers paid by the crown and in the service of the crown. So that the 1958 Act on pensions is really a colonial act that said, in respect of public officers in Grenada, this is what is going to be provided to them by way of pension. So the pension, fast forward to 74 with the Constitution, and bear in mind that the Constitution, in many respects, is a colonial relic. In other words, there are many features of the colonial arrangements that are embedded in the Constitution. It's independent Constitution for us, but it does contain a number of those things. The principal thing for the purposes of our discussion, of course, is the pension. So let me say right away that the judgment that has triggered all of this discussion did not create a new right. It simply declared the right to pension by eligible public officers. And my dear friend from the DPA could deal with this question of eligibility, because it's not everybody who work with government is covered by this constitutional pension. Totally, there are issues here that people need to understand. So the judgment does not create a new source of rights for public officers. It declares that this right has existed. It is embedded in the Constitution. Now, last point before I shut up. The revolution came and suspended the Constitution. Within the life of the revolution, living, of course, without a constitution, a people's law was passed to create the NIS. And within that NIS statute, people's law, there was provision for pensions for working people and so on and so on. So my argument is this, that without a revolution, we would not be having, let me rephrase it, did the revolution not introduce this NIS and the provisions that it did in that context, we would not be having a discussion today. There would be no issue. And because of that, I say this in closing, the issue is not about a fair solution, which is what the Prime Minister posed last night. It's not about that. The notion of a fair solution is premised on the thinking that there has to be some equitable sharing of public resources. Well, this is not the issue. The issue is not fair solution, the issue is manageable solution. Manageable solution. In other words, that whoever forms the government of Grenada, over time, must put in place adequate arrangements to fund the pension bill. So we could talk a little later about the expansion of the public service and other government employees and how that has impacted the sheer size of the bill that is now confronting the state. All right, so thanks a lot.
Mr. Roberts, you want to take your share of this one?
Good morning to you, Keyshawn, and to my two colleagues there. I want to wish you well. I want to endorse what Brother Willie has said. He has put the whole issue into perspective, so I wouldn't delve into it, other than to say that the challenge ahead is no small one, because quite clearly you're talking about people who have worked in a system for minimum 26 plus years, and are expecting at the end of that period of their life in work, whether they reach 60 or they make the 28 and whatever it is. I think that thing has gone way too long. In fact, yes, the PRG would have created what we have now, but I don't think we have dealt with that process adequately over the years. Last night would have had a lot of optic and, I would say the Prime Minister endeavored to convince those of us who were listening that, this is now a serious approach by him. For me, the one thing that perhaps I would say from last night's presentation, the names of the people called, well, you can't fault them. Justice Barron and Dr. Spencer Thomas, Kerry Grenade, and so forth. Really, perhaps it brings some hope. But I would have loved to see someone with someone, let me put it like that, as a Madonna Harford, who has over the years championed this issue, has been a permanent secretary or was a permanent secretary, is known for fairness, is conscious about this whole issue. I would have loved to see somebody of that caliber being appointed on the 5. But quite clearly, I am not impressed with the fact that, to me, delaying tactics is again being used. This talk about a national committee broad-based, there's absolutely no need for that. You can rethink the pension scheme as Willie explained, but Jamaica had a similar crisis. They solved it 15 years ago. We are still inviting people who perhaps some of them have very little idea about it, and that's why Willie's introduction is so important. And this is not the first court judgment. This is the 3rd court judgment. So I am saying to you as a pensioner for 8 years now, I am saying to you that there are people who are home before I retired and have not received anything. And I'm talking about public service commission appointed people. I'm not talking about the other sections of people who under that constitution thing are not qualified to receive, because you must be appointed by the PSC, you must have a letter and so forth. So I'm talking about that group of people who are home, teachers, I could say for them for sure because I served in the union, public officers, and that thing has to be dealt with. The optics and the passionate appeal about patriotism. I think we have had enough of that. We want to see work, and that is what I am interested in, not that flamboyancy that I saw last night. That is not going to take me to a shop or the supermarket or the doctor to pay my bill. So I will urge the Prime Minister to focus on the three unions who are involved. We have set up a committee and get the thing done. This massive committee about church group and little NGOs and so forth, that's not going to help it. Go read what Jamaica did and you'll see that there's a way out. Also, let me say this quickly. In the 80s, in the 90s, you had Mr. Michael Lindo. He was what in the he was one of the legal advisors, a suspect in the government then.
Solicitor General. Yeah.
Solicitor General, that is correct. He came up with he had a committee. I remember the unions were represented and they presented a package at the cabinet. You had other people doing a similar work. And those things were just ignored. You created special pension, which I'm a recipient of, and I was appointed, in '79. So I don't know how I qualified for special pension. I'm grateful for it. So really and truly, I cannot blame the union and the workers. They all are disgusted and feel that our good Prime Minister is delaying and delaying and delaying. And while that is occurring, people are suffering and suffering. So I would urge that this I would hope this is the final straw, that we take the problems of the workers and the unions and efficiently deal with it. There are competent people in Grenada who I'm sure can have this thing. Well, I know it can't continue as it is because the public service has broadened and the NIS has to play a role, but somebody has to make it happen very quickly.
Okay, I want to switch over to Mr. Williams shortly. Mr. Williams, I wanted to get your view on the announcement of establishing the committee. But before we touch on that, I want to go to Ms. Jones from the DPA office. Give us insight as to the role and function of the DPA in all of this.
Good morning, Kishon. Morning to the fellow panelists, to your viewers and listeners as well. At the Department of Public Administration, what we are primarily responsible for is managing the human resource function across the public service. So issues of terms and conditions of employment and other varied employment matters, my department will have a responsibility in addressing some of these concerns. So as it relates to the issue of pension, we had a policy decision a few years ago, around 2015, 2016, coming out of the structural adjustment program, where that decision was made to bring greater focus to the issue of pension restoration and reform. And so a pension secretariat was established within the department to lead the charge for pension restoration. So we had a massive registration drive that was to allow us to collect the data on public officers who had since retired from the government service. Obviously, they would have left without any pension benefits from the state. And we needed to compile that data in the event that we had to initiate some form of activity under that program. That was a success. We managed to collect significant amounts of information. Persons would have come in and they registered with us. Going forward, this is actually some of the data that we will be using to address the current challenge that we have before us. So this is primarily our role in this regard. And we provide technical advice on these issues as well, given that there are eligibility requirements that we must fact check, the due diligence must be done before these applications can be passed on for processing. The department was also instrumental in providing policy advice on the top-up that was introduced in late 2018, early 2019, as an interim measure to address the challenges regarding the pension restoration and reform issue. So we have been working on this issue for a while now, and we are simply going to continue to do what we've been doing because we certainly have a complex policy challenge that we must meet, as evidenced by the decision that was conveyed last night by the Prime Minister. So a policy decision has been arrived at, and now we are just going to continue to focus on pushing ahead to ensure, first of all, that we have all of the data that's required. Now we have to ensure that we have duly accounted for all of the public officers who have since retired from the government service. The issue of the current employees, that's not so much of a challenge for us because we have introduced a new human resource management system, which we have been working on over the last 2 years as a means of ensuring that we can accurately account for the employment history of persons in the government service. So we do not have significant data challenges with current employees, but we must ensure that for the officers who have since retired from the government service, we have everything that is required to begin the process of assessing and determining eligibility requirements. Because as one of the panelists alluded to earlier, while the pension benefit is available, it is not an entitlement that is afforded to every type of worker in the public service. So there is going to be some determination of eligibility as we assess the data that we have going forward.
Okay, and if I may ask, they're wondering, okay, with your fact checking, how do I know that I'm qualified? What are some of the important pieces that you're looking for to make that determination? Because I know a lot of people might be saying, okay, well, do I qualify? Am I eligible to be a part of this whole process?
Right. I'm glad you asked that question. Now, we have 4 major pension acts in the public service, and each one defines its own eligibility conditions. So there is the Pension Act that governs the teaching service. There is the Pension Act that governs the police service. There is the Act that governs the prison service. There is the Act that governs the general mainstream public officers. And then we also have the Special Pension Act. And each one describes its own eligibility conditions. Across the board, there are some similarities. For example, there is a provision for early retirement. Public officers can retire from as early as 55 years old. Under these conditions, you are eligible to receive a gratuity, and then you would receive your pension payments beginning from age 60. Generally, the grounds for retirement include ill health, so that's medical grounds, maximum service, which is 26 years and 8 months, or you can do so on the grounds of age. And in the public service, the mandatory retirement age is still 60 years. So these are just a few of the commonalities across the board. Of course, you must have been appointed by the Public Service Commission in most instances. The special pension is slightly different in that the special pension was introduced in 2003, and that was to cater for a group of employees that had no pension rights at all. Recalling as well that the PDA at the time was still treated as constitutional. So there was a group of employees that had absolutely no pension rights. And that particular scheme was introduced where a public officer who was in the government service before 1983 remained in the government service, and that is continuously remained in the government service, and thereafter received a definitive appointment post 85, these officers now had an eligibility under the special pension. And here we have officers like student teachers, student nurses, community health aid, officers who would have served in the PRA and subsequently joined the police service or served in any other civil capacity. These were a few of the officers that had no rights at all. And so the special pension scheme introduced in 2003 catered for these officers. But by and large, you have to satisfy one of the grounds for retirement: ill health, compulsory age of retirement 60, maximum service 26 years 8 months, a definitive appointment from the public service, and the variations would then come depending on the specific act that governs your employment in the public service. But at the DPA, if individuals have questions about whether or not they are going to satisfy the conditions, you can come in and you can see us, you can have a chat with us. We ask you to walk with all of your appointment letters, whatever you have. We do accept statutory declarations in the event that a person indicates, well, they can't find their appointment letter or their whatever letter of appointment they would have received when they joined the government service. You walk with all of that. You walk with a piece of identification. We prefer to use your birth certificate and any other document you have that relates to your employment in the government service. You can come in and you can have a chat with us, and we can guide you through that process of determining whether you have an eligibility for any one of the pension schemes in the public service.
So I'm going to give you a little break now, and I'm going to come back with you shortly. Mr. Williams, I know earlier Mr. Roberts spoke about the national committee to be established to deal with the pension issue. What's your take on the establishment of such a committee and the names involved?
Yeah, thank you so much. And let me begin this response by commending my sister permanent secretary on the clarity of her presentation. It is really a treat to hear a PS present in this very lucid and manner. So I don't know her, but I thought I should just say that. Now, before I get to the question of the advisory committee announced last evening, I want to make this point, and it incorporates this question of the advisory committee. So it seems to me that the matter is being handled now, is proceeding on two tracks. There is a political track in which everybody has been invited to come and talk with the Prime Minister and the government. Towards what end? Because I don't know that I've heard the objectives of that particular session. I perhaps could conclude that it's an attempt to arrange public opinion in favor of whatever intention the regime might hold. But the point is that it's not so much what I presume, but the need for the government itself to disclose what its objectives are regarding this broad-based audience that it has summoned on the issue. Now, the three unions, I mean, this one beats me, because it seems to me that the beneficiaries of the judgment which is causing all of these things are those very people who went to court, those three unions. So in my view, the first line of conversation engagement should be with those three. If you want to convene other people thereafter, that's fine. But if you don't, and you tell the three, come and talk alongside everybody else, it seems to me that you might be trying to sandwich these people. It's not a happy situation, right? I don't know what is the thinking behind it, but it doesn't cut it for me. And I know that especially, you take the example of the Siemens Union. You see, I'm not picking a fight with the Siemens Union. They have tremendous negotiating power. And our cost of living in Grenada is heavily impacted by the cost of labor on the port. There has never been any call for any national consultation regarding labor rates at the port, which flow directly and impact the cost of living. So you see, on the one hand, we don't engage in consultation and national discourse, and on another hand, we say, well, let's do so. And you have a trade union that has a special privilege and so on, purporting to express itself in a matter in which it is unconnected in terms of the immediacy of its interests, totally unconnected. Anyway, so that's a part. Let me say this. So you have a political tract identified by the round table talks with everybody, the marish and the parish, the public opinion gathering mechanism, that thing, it's political. And then now you put in place, you've announced last night, a technical group, the advisory committee. Well, first off, I did not hear the terms of reference for that advisory committee, except that is to make recommendations to the government. I recognize that all of the people named there are people who are handpicked by the regime. So how are we squaring off these things? Okay, and if you are entitled to have your own advisory body or entity, and I'm sure that's the case, then the other people, the people on the other side, the labor unions, are entitled to have their own technical capacity to advise them and so on, because at some point, these two people must come together to work this thing out. Now, let me make another housekeeping point. The difference between policy and law. My sister PS made this reference to policy and so on, fine. So invariably what you have is policies intended to implement the law. And you will have a situation where, or situations where government devise policy and then find that they need to escalate that. They need to bring it, raise it to the level of law, either by way of a regulation or by way of a law itself. But policy, when you come face to face with policy and law, policy is subordinate to law. The Pension Disqualification Act, that thing which has been struck down, had to be struck down on the basis of law. No, it is a Parliament of Grenada that passed that thing. What were the parliamentarians seeking to do? They were seeking to escape the obligations. They saw it, but they thought they could escape the obligations of the pension bill by purporting to disqualify a whole set of people. So in other words, they were trying to, the PRG was unconstitutional, it passed an act, the NIS law, all right, under no constitution, you come with a constitution now, and you say, listen, let us constitutionalize what the PRG had put in place, and you describe it as a Pension Disqualification Act. We can't eat our cake and have it. So that has to go. So the composition of that thing, advisory committee, is interesting. And I make a last point regarding that. There is a lawyer on board. There's a lawyer on board. What is his role? It seems to me that the role of Mr. Byron, Sir Byron, has to be to advise the regime regarding those aspects of law that the Prime Minister adverted to last night. Really? Because outside of that, outside of legal challenges of some kind, what you have is the need for the regime, properly advised by its technicians, to deal with or make decisions regarding options for paying this bill. Options for paying the bill. Because if you say that you are not appealing the judgment, but on the other hand, you say there are some legal matters that need to be clarified and so on and so on. So you are delaying the thing. And the clarification that you say you need is going to really come home at the level of eligibility. Who is going to be eligible if you get through with any legal matters that you seek to have the court addressed? And if the court were to do so in your favor, is going to address eligibility. Again, what is going on? Is it fiscal management? Somebody might say that. Or is it an attempt not to grant the pension that people might otherwise be entitled to? People might say that. So I say in relation to your question that there are two tracks on which the regime seems to be proceeding, and I don't know how we reconcile the two. I don't know. Because in the case of the round table thing, they have not said what the objectives are, as far as I know. And in the case of the advisory committee, they have not disclosed what the terms of reference are. I didn't hear them last night. I wouldn't purport to say that they don't exist. That might be presumptuous of me, but I didn't hear that. And we need to hear that. It is so important to the nation that we need to have all of these details. So that's my long answer to your short question.
Before I come back to you, I have some public interest questions for you. I want to just switch over to Mr. Roberts. Mr. Roberts, Mr. Williams actually spoke of, the three major unions feeling that they are sandwiched in this whole process, considering that they were part and parcel of, you could say, probably a successful judgment. Do you think that this is one of the reasons for the three major unions sort of delaying their involvement or withdrawing their involvement as it relates to dialogue?
Well, Keyshawn, having been part of this thing for almost a quarter century, I'm no longer there. I've retired from the public service. This is not a today issue. This issue goes back to the fall of the revolution in '83, and it reached a peak under the presidency of Sister Laurie Clarkson, Sister Clarice Charles, and Brother Chester Humphrey. In fact, that's why I invite people to read the Solicitor General's presentation to the then government. And if you look after that, you had cases. I know Bristol, the late Carl Bristol, he worked with the unions throughout his lifetime and articulated solutions that could solve this thing. You see, Keyshawn, let me put it this way, and I don't want us to lose track of that. The unions are representing workers, very ordinary workers, people who have given 35, 40 years of service. And you cannot delay this thing too long. You have delayed it already for so many years. Many people have died because you're talking about 30 years plus of this continued round table and all that kind of technical things that when you retire, you have no time for it. I am saying to us here, and hopefully the government will do, Jamaica had a practical solution. The workers were disgusted and they weren't interested in all this optics and names of importance. They wanted a solution. I really and truly would say to you that, and maybe that's not what you asked me, but quite clearly, there has to be a settlement between the government pension and the NIS. I mean, I'm paid 2 pensions. The point I'm making here, I don't know that the state can continue in that vein. That's what Jamaica had. And they had to find a way out. What they did was very simple. The NIS was top up to pay the constitutional requirement, and the government paid the gratuity. And that is what we want, a solution. We're not interested in all this. And I really couldn't see the unions go into a discussion like that, because I have been to discussions like that. You have people who have absolutely no sense of what this thing is about. And Willie is correct, the PS did a great job in highlighting the various pensions that we have and what requires you to be a person who qualify for this thing. So we need to get down to work. I don't know what more I can say, because Willie is in bag and target with his point that we had no guideline as to what Sir Dennis Byron and Dr. Spencer Thomas, we don't know what kind of guidelines they have been given. Then there's this other committee of people who know and who don't know. So really and truly, I can't see how these things are helping us. You're talking about workers. In fact, I don't want to call names, but I know people who have taught for 40 years. And people have had to make individual representations to the government of the day and to politicians to say, look, these are people who have served us, do something. And thank God they end up with special pension or whatever it is. But you can't be in your 70s and still being I don't know. I mean, I'm getting old. I'm grateful that I have a pension. So Dr. Mitchell has to find a shorter way to get this thing done. I know it has to be done thoroughly. And let me advance this thing too. We have to do something that is permanent, because there are other people, as Ms. Jones would indicate, there are certainly more than 50, 60 public officers retiring every year. When I used to be there, used to be 106, 110, some of them a little more. So in that 100 plus, sometimes you have 60 plus, 70 plus people who are appointed by the Public Service Commission. So it is a continuation of people exiting. So I would hope that the DPA and all the relevant institutions of the state would work on this thing expeditiously, because it cannot continue as a waiting game. And Willie is right. The CMEN is an important institution in the country. I have served in this union as general secretary for 20 years. I never heard a consultation on the role of whatever the CMEN, or the role of the bank in general, or the role of the TAU in any organization. The government went and, what they have to do, they do. So let's treat the pension and the workers. I want to keep saying the workers, not the pension. I talk about the workers, because there are people who have mortgages, children in university. We have to see these things as people, not a whole block of unions and just the unions will continue, but the people are suffering. So I hope that we see some kind of activism among, I don't know if it's the committee appointed by the government or the cabinet, but we want to see solutions and people getting paid as quickly as possible. Now, where will the government find the money? I'm not in government, but clearly we need to see some action. Richard Duncan came up with some kind of proposal. To me, it sounds as something you can work with temporarily. But again, I go back to my point that we need a long-term solution. As Willie quite rightly said, when people, prior to the revolution, people who retired were not put through that process. They went and followed the appropriate line, and they got the money and the retirement, and they went home.
Okay. Ms. Jones, I want to come back to you. Earlier in our conversation, you mentioned in terms of persons being eligible, the workers within the system, that's probably an easy breezy. In terms of the persons who would have already exited the system, what sort of method of approach is being used in terms of your ensuring that the people who already exited the system don't get left? What is the method of approach that you're using to ensure that you connect with those persons?
Right, Kishon. So as I said earlier, we do have this massive public officers in coming and getting the advice that is needed so that we have the information to allow for the decision making. So essentially what we want to do is to issue a sort of checklist that outlines what information you are required to produce, and you will come in, you will sit with us, we will take all of the information, go through it, ensures that it presents what is necessary to assist us, and then we'll take it from there. So we are going to do a series of public announcements aimed at the retired public officers, because we really do not want anyone to get left behind. And let me also add that this is actually not let me put it this way, this is kind of like a validation measure. because we do have information on persons who would have, persons who served in the government. But we need to ensure that the information is verified, the information is validated. So asking the individual to come in with whatever information is available to them is actually more of a validation exercise rather than a data gathering exercise. As I said, we do have an existing database, and we have approximately 550 retired public officers registered with us. We know that some persons might not have registered with us in the initial phase of the program when we launched it. So we are appealing again to any retired officer who has yet to come in to register with us, to come in and register with us. The process may sound a bit tedious, but let me assure you it's not. Even if you don't have the documents available, as I said, we accept statutory declarations. So we give you the form for that, because as well, we standardize the information requirements. We don't want, any kind of information. We want specific details to assist us in arriving at decisions. So we will provide you with the template for the statutory declaration, and you will find your recommenders to provide you with that statutory declaration. The important thing is that you come in and you have a conversation with us. We will provide you with the appropriate guidance and advice, right? Kishon, I just wanted to make an observation in relation to a comment that was made previously. Now, in the public service, there is something that is called pensionable service and non-pensionable service. And it is very unfortunate that there are many officers who is serving in the government service, but have no knowledge of the exact rules of the engagement, if I can refer to it like that. Now, in the teaching service, for example, an individual might have joined the teaching service as a probationer teacher. That is not pensionable service. It's not a pensionable position. That teacher never upgraded himself or herself. Upon retirement, they exited the service as a probationer teacher. They served 30, 35 years in the teaching service as a probationer teacher. That teacher has no pension entitlement at all, because probationer teacher is not a pensionable position. The service given in that capacity is not pensionable. And they retire and they come in and they say, but I've worked for the government for 30 years, for 40 years, and I have nothing to get. But according to the rules, and I'm making this point because it is very important that we all understand the rules. We are not making up the rules as we go. The rules have been there since 1958. So sometimes we hear, well, I've worked for 40 years, I've worked for 35 years. But did you work in a position that is pensionable? Do you have pensionable service? It makes a difference and it matters. And these are the types of conversations we will have with you. And that's why we're asking you, have a chat with us. Let us be the ones providing you with the advice and with the guidance, so that we can walk you through that process of determining whether you are carrying an eligibility or not.
For that, we kind of quickly running out of some time, but still, Mr. Joseph, I'm going to put you on the spot. I want you to, if we were to look into the crystal ball in this whole situation, we hear a lot of people after the address last night talking about further delays and delays/politics. If we were to look at the worst case scenario in this situation, if we say, okay, let's delay this some more, if we look in a crystal ball, if this is not tackled, what do you foresee?
Yeah, well, thanks again. the matter has to be settled. There is no doubt about that. Right? It's be settled, in my view, on the basis of some professional and technical advice, alongside eligibility criteria, really. So it's not an issue, to my mind, there are no issues of law that apply at this point. It is the measures that are taken to establish a fund to finance the pension bill, with arrangements to grow that fund over time, wherever it might be placed. And then the question of the management of that fund. So there has to be a solution. And I don't see any reason why it needs to be dragged out. I mean, last night I thought many people might have ended up with a pension migraine. Well, we don't need that. Yeah, it is an onerous responsibility, but the elements of a solution exist. Let's put them to work and cut out a lot of the fluff and so on that we heard and so on that really are not relevant. A lot of mischief statements and so on, not relevant. I suppose it's because we're in this election, season that we are weaving things into this thing that really don't belong to the matter. So I don't think that this thing should give us all of this horrors at all. In fact, back on April the 10th, when the Prime Minister told some of his people that not to have any headache over the pension, they have a solution, I thought he was serious. But he came back last night and left us with a pension migraine because he has weaved so many things into the thing. Short answer. Put the professionals to work, let them generate options for funding this thing, right? Negotiate and consult with the relevant parties, reach an agreement, and begin the process of honoring commitments to eligible public officers. That's how I see it.
Ms. Jones, I want to come back to you. I have a question. One is asking in terms of time frame, from the minute time you go through all your process, what is the time factor? You said that the process is not very tedious. Persons just have to come in. But one is asking the time factor. After we do all of that, how long do we have to wait? What are the success stories you could probably share?
Do you mean wait for a payout?
Yes.
Okay, well, unfortunately, I am not in a position to indicate how long one may have to wait to receive a payout. Because this is actually related to the question that we're all seeking to answer. What is the solution to be had to allow for the implementation of the decision? So I am not in a position at this time to say to you that 4 weeks after registering with us, you will begin to receive a payout. There is not a solution to that implementation challenge as yet. What I can tell you is this. Currently, we continue to make payouts from the top-up that was instituted back in late 2018. We continue to receive applicants for that. Now, the top-up will allow for persons to continue to receive a payout. And persons who are already receiving that are individuals whose eligibility for pension benefits under the rules as they existed in 1958 was determined, was confirmed. It was actually restricted very tightly to the groups of persons who met all of the eligibility requirements. So we know for sure that once you are a beneficiary of the top-up, you are carrying an eligibility for benefits under 58. So we continue to make payouts under that. And at whichever point in time a decision has been arrived at in terms of the solution for the payout, we are merely going to discount what has already been paid to you under the top-up scheme, and we would pay you whatever else is owed. So from our end, I see this as a continuation of this interim measure. Persons are currently receiving it. We just received a last batch of applicants a few weeks ago, which we have reviewed and we will process. And this, for me, remains a bridge while we continue to find the long-term solution to making these payouts. So I can't say to anybody today that payouts will begin 4 weeks from now or 6 weeks from now, but we will continue to make the payouts on the top up. So again, if you come in, we can sit with you and we can determine if you have that eligibility. And once we do, then we can continue with that measure that we have ongoing until there is a decision on the payouts. For me, this is going to ensure that beneficiaries do not remain out of pocket. Beneficiaries do not continue to have challenges in meeting their obligations when they retire from the government service. And we will continue to make sure that we can maintain that bridge until there is a decision on the payouts. So this is currently the land as I see it. And it certainly is a public policy issue that we have to resolve. We've been going at this for long before I even joined the public service. We've been going at this. And the time has come for us to find a long-term solution. I must add as well that there are issues of clarity that is needed. So from the perspective of the DPA, for example, a public officer who, upon retirement, received special pension, I have asked the question, should that public officer have received special pension? Is the special pension actually a valid instrument as it stands? And if not, is that public officer now eligible to receive benefits under 58? Those are administrative questions that I will ask and I would expect to have an answer to. So there is need to have clarity on the implications of the decision. And I think that's a reasonable discussion that we should have. Again, I've also asked the question, and one of the panelists would have made that point. There is the issue of the ability to continue to afford sustaining 2 parallel pension schemes. Those are rational questions that will arise when you begin to examine what it means to actually put that decision in effect. And I wish to dispel the notion that there is no debate over whether you have the right or not. The rights have been restored according to the decision. Now it has to be implemented. And a discussion is necessary to allow for us to figure out how to bring these elements of the solution that Mr. Joseph so rightly pointed out. How do we bring the elements of the solution together in a way that ensures that, one, this is going to be long-term, sustainable, affordable, without jeopardizing the future of our country. And as I've said before, we have 3 different categories of people that we have to look at in this issue. We have those who have already retired from the public service. We have the current employees who, and public officers retire every year. On average, the retirement in the public service is 110. So every day that goes by, you may either have an individual retiring from the public service or an individual being recruited into the public service. Now, that means the decision that is arrived at has to be able to deal effectively with how pension benefits are going to be dealt with in the government service in a manner that allows for affordability and sustainability in the long term. And those issues are issues that warrant conversations. And I don't see how we can arrive at a lasting solution if we do not dialogue on such an important public policy matter.
All right, thank you. Gentlemen, any one of you want to...
Yes, thank you. And really, I'm encouraged for this issue of dialogue and so on. But the right people must dialogue, engage in the dialogue.
The right people must engage in the dialogue, and there's a role for the technicians to advise both sets of people. So we have economists and we have actuaries and so on. Let them do the speed work. Let them generate options and let both sides examine these things, right? There's a critical issue regarding how you reconcile, or perhaps a need to, this NIS arrangement, NIS pension arrangement, alongside the constitutional pension arrangement. That is not just a cute issue, it is a critical issue to address. So we're going to have to look at this NIS pension and so on in the context of affordability by the state under this head of expense called pension. So again, my last point is to say this: we have a sufficiency of expertise to do this work professionally. We need to cut out all this political noise in the thing with all of those objectives that people are trying to achieve. And do you understand why it is that no previous constitutional reform effort has proposed any amendment regarding section 92, 93 of the Constitution and 83, 84? Nobody has proposed any change to that. So the law stands. And therefore, it is not about law anymore. It is principally about how you prepare to establish a fund to take care of the thing. And the actuaries and economists are the people who are well placed to devise and propose these things. And that's all. And let's leave this political noise out of it. And all this thing about public opinion and ganging up and so on. We can leave these things out of it, because I ain't gonna help anybody. Okay, thanks a lot. Good morning.
All right. Mr. Roberts, you closing words?
Well, I cannot disagree with the two panelists who have spoken recently. What I would add is that in 2009, around that area, I think 2009, Mario St. Rose, who is a known leading economist, he came to Grenada, he looked at the issue and provided recommendations. And Mario MACTU was part of the Caribbean Development Bank. He was a permanent secretary in St. Lucia. So he was one of great experience. And I'm saying to us that we have not had a shortage of people offering advice. What we have had is a shortage of implementation. And I would hope again that we see this thing as people. Each one of us here has a mother. Each one of us know, well, I don't know, I can't speak for everybody, but I'm a parent. And having retired, it means I have someone who perhaps could be in the public service. I have a family. So I'm saying to us that it is we who are affected. So that dialogue cannot continue forever. That dialogue has to be, it must be given a reasonable time span. And I am saying to us again that, Ms. Jones, this thing has continued from 1985 when Sister Clarkson became, 86 when Sister Clarkson became president, to 2022. And we have not had a solution. So I don't know how much more dialogue we expect to have. As I said again, the NIS is a welcome addition. That's perhaps one of the best things the PRG left us with. Jamaica found a way to do it. We perhaps should look at what they did. And clearly, Jamaica is a bigger population, a bigger public service than Grenada. I don't hear any confusion. There was noise at some point, but everybody seems to have accepted it. And I would say to you, I agree, there cannot be two pensions from the government. I mean, natural attrition perhaps will take care of those of us who are getting it. But going forward, we have to have something that is meeting the constitutional requirement. And once we do that, I think we are safe. So I would wish the government and DPA, I would wish you, Ms. Jones, in particular, because that's your area, that we could find some kind of a solution. I know you're not in cabinet, but hopefully your wisdom and your guidance to those who are elected would help bring a conclusion to that process as soon as possible, because people are hurting. And I'm glad to hear that something is being done to help those who are feeling the strain that this chop up continues. Let me just say that briefly. 2018, when I ran in the elections, I was ashamed. I meet people who I learned from them in the public service, and they saying to me, Ray, I am still home, penniless, got nothing. I expected a pension, and they were people who were duly appointed by the Public Service Commission. So let's see how we can make this thing work and work in the interest of ordinary workers as quickly as possible. Thank you for the opportunity to engage my fellow panelists this morning, Keyshawn.
All right, thank you. Ms. Jones, you want to say your final words?
Thank you, Keyshawn, for the invitation to participate in this discussion. It's a discussion that goes right to the heart of how we manage our human capital in this country. And we have to find a solution. I want to be brave and bold and ambitious here and say that we will find a solution. And we want to do so in a way that serves the best interests of everybody. We want to ensure, like I said, that we approach this issue in a very rational way, without disenfranchising anyone, and ensuring that we protect the employment rights that workers in the government service have. Like I said before, it is a challenge. It's a public challenge, one that it's the biggest of my lifetime, I should say. And I am only just starting off in the public policy space. But it is a challenge that can be solved. I believe that at this time, we are gathering the tools that would be integral to arriving at a solution. And I can say so from the point of view of participating internally in the process to ensure that we take the right steps in finding a lasting solution to this. I hear the cries that we don't want this to be long and drawn out. At the same time, I would hasten to say that while I don't also want to see a long drawn out process, I do want to see a process that is done right, a process that is going to be effective in giving us a lasting solution to this problem. And I would say this again, we must talk. When we have to treat with public policy matters, we must talk.
All right.
Thank you, Keyshawn.
Okay, thank you so much. Well, Mr. Joseph, I think you said good morning already, so I would take that as your final words, unless you have something final that you want to give us.
No, Keyshawn, my word is already in.
All right.
Thanks so much.
Okay. All right, but we want to say a very special thank you, panelists, for joining us this morning. This was a special edition of Rise and Shine, looking at the Prime Minister's address last pension and so on. We had with us William Joseph, Ray Roberts, and of course the Permanent Secretary in the DPA, Rhonda Jones. We want to say a very special thank you for those of you who joined us on MTV and those of you who joined us on our social media platform. We want to say a very special thanks and good morning to you. It's overcast morning, so if you're traversing on the nation's road, you want to be exceedingly careful. I'm your host, Keyshawn Thomas, saying goodbye. Come back again.
I'd like to thank you for joining me on this journey through the stars. If you enjoyed this lecture, please come back Thursday for the exact same one.
Do I look like I just woke up?
No.
Great, I'm gonna go say hey to Raj.
What are you guys giggling about?
They're passing notes to each other.
Love notes?
If you love math.
And we do.
It's for our super asymmetry theory.
Amy and I have been having so much fun collaborating together.
Well, you know what they say, you never collaborate as much as your first year of marriage.
Hey, great show. Thanks. Oh, Howard, this is Andrea. She's the director of the planetarium.
Hi.
Nice to meet you. I'm Howard Wolowitz, engineer, husband, father, astronaut.
Really? You're an astronaut?
Well, I don't like to brag.
Yeah, but somehow you'll manage.
Raj, you should have Howard join you for one of your shows.
Oh, that might be fun.
Well, it might be, but with 2 small children at home and a full-time job, I'm sure you're too busy.
No, I could find the time.
Well, you don't have to decide right now.
It's okay.
Well,
I
he can't do it.
Hey, hurry up, guys. The gift shop's closing, and Amy said I can get 1 big thing or 2 little things.
Our whole universe was in a hot, dense state that nearly 14 billion years ago expansion started. Wait, the earth began to cool, the autotrophs began to drool, Neanderthals developed tools, we built a wall. We built the pyramids, math, science, history, unraveling the mystery that all started with a big bang.
The sensory isolation helmet on you for about 5 minutes. All you need to do is sit still and relax.
What do I do if I start to get claustrophobic?
Oh, the helmet will sense that and stop the experiment.
Really?
No, but that'd be cool, wouldn't it?
Amy, are you busy?
I've got a subject wired up for a sensory study.
So...
Yes, I'm busy. I'm tracking a subject's brain activity in real time as we introduce olfactory stimuli.
I'm smelling baby powder.
That's just my husband.
Well, I had a thought about our super asymmetry theory. Let me show you this one thing.
Well, I want to see it, but not when I'm in the middle of an experiment.
Still baby powder.
Boy, he is annoying. You know any of those buttons?
Look, I'm really excited about our paper too, but I've got a lot of my own work to catch up on, so let's talk later.
Okay, well, let me just say one more thing. Lambda calculus. And if that wets your whistle, you know where to find me.
You okay? You seem distracted.
I'm just thinking about Raj.
And I'm thinking about Chris Hemsworth. Let's go.
It sort of hurt my feelings.
Biceps, hammer, abs. Still in it.
Why wouldn't he want me to be in his planetarium show?
And it's gone.
Sorry, it's just the director of the planetarium thought it'd be fun for me to join Raj for one of his shows, and he made it clear that he didn't want me to.
Of course he wouldn't want you to. I mean, think about it. If you were him, would you want to share the stage with a sexy-ass astronaut?
I don't know, how sexy are we talking?
Oh, you know. Tight pants, huge biceps, magic hammer.
Wait, who are we
I'm
talking
back in it.
The fundamental problem with elementary quantum mechanical formalism is that the Fourier transform extends to minus infinity in time.
Hey, don't dumb this down for me.
Honey, I'm late for that thing. See ya.
Leonard?
Oh, Sheldon, didn't see you there. What's up?
Well, he was excited to talk science with Amy, but she was working late, so he decided to come over and share it with me. With me, Leonard.
With me.
Sheldon, we've talked about this. You can't go around boring other people's wives.
Yeah. I already got a man for that.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
It's just I've been enjoying my collaboration with Amy, but ever since we got back from our honeymoon, she has so little time.
She does have her own job.
Yeah, but it's so dull. Trying to understand how the brain translates the 5 senses into biochemical information. I'd rather wait in line without my phone.